Tonight, Jim Mitchell will present Firearms throughout West Virginia's history. Jim's discussion will begin with early flintlocks and then with some of the later cartridge rifles and shotguns. His talk will focus primarily on civilian muzzle-loading percussion cap lock rifles that were made by hand-working gunsmiths and were either made in West Virginia or gravitated to the state and used here. Jim has several period pieces on display. Jim is the curator of the West Virginia State Museum and the Culture Center here in Charleston. As a professional decorative arts and technological history curator for 50 years, he has worked for the state museums in Wisconsin, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, as well as at the Bennington, Vermont Museum and the defunct Carborundum Museum of Ceramics in Niagara Falls, New York. Jim has also been a museum director twice. He has a bachelor's degree in history from the University of Wisconsin in Madison, of which he is a native. He also received a Master of Arts degree from the University of Delaware in the Winterthur Program in Early American Culture and a Master of Science degree in Public Administration from Shippensburg University of Pennsylvania. In his spare time, he is a woodworker and an amateur musician, singing and playing bass instruments. Please welcome Jim.
I'm going to sit down most of the time. I had a knee replaced 6 months ago, and it's playing hobs with me. But I have a lot of white-gloved assistants tonight, and the main reason for them is to hold weapons up so you can see them, and they'll walk around with them, both have port arms, you know, and so you can see things closer. These weapons are weapons that are in the collection, but not ones that you see readily. If you've come tonight expecting to see Daniel Boone's rifle or the Wetzel rifle, we have to disappoint you and tell you to come back when the museum's open because it's on display. The museum's cases are very secure. They're so secure that the staff can't get in them, by and large. Our firearms collection has 220 pieces, and there are 52 weapons on display in the museum. That's not 52 firearms. That includes bayonets and sabers and knives, anything that can be construed as a weapon. And we cover aspects of West Virginia history where weapons show up. So the Civil War is there, the frontier. Our frontier collection has about 18 weapons in it. 10 of them are downstairs on display in a little kiosk by the cabin. In the Civil War, this discovery room, we have about 10 weapons on display. All the weapons out there are weapons with stories. Even if the labeling doesn't tell the story, you can get somebody to, a customer service representative to talk with you. Maybe you can ask questions and get some of that information from them. Or if worst comes to worst, you can call me. I'll gladly talk to you about the things in the collection. What I wanted to do tonight was basically show you things that have come in recently. Now, I'll get the cart before the horse. If I follow the script properly, and I promised myself I would, the first thing is to thank people. I oftentimes go rattling along and don't bother to say thank you. So, first of all, the staff. Clarence Crago, Dick Faust on the camera, Brett Hart, behind me somewhere, Randy Markham, who you just saw, Matt McGrew, Jamie Simmons, Susie sitting behind the desk up there, and Denise, and last but not least, of course, Joe Geiger, the director of the State Archives. Now, I'm also going to thank the donors. If you're one of the donors, when I read your name, put your hand up. Many of the donors are with us tonight, but they've just finished singing Vespers in Heaven. The donors in alphabetical order are Roger Bryant, the Bureau of Corrections, Nancy Edwards Buell, Herschel Burford, James Merle Carter, Nicholas Dumas, Richard Max Drake, Marjorie Evans, J. Allen Gill, John P. Hale, Margaret Hills, Tina Hudnall, Eleanor P. Durst, Paul Klein, Richard Meckstroff, Jeff and Sean Morrison, Jeffrey M. Pratt, and Samuel M. Stowe IV. Nobody put their hands up. Okay, that's good. Now I can tell all the stories of the school without the donors catching me. Okay. First of all, Clarence, pick up the first rifle. This is going to be back and forth. Clarence is a good friend. He's a mechanical technician here at the Cultural Center. He's a riflesmith in his own stead. I thought one time maybe I'd ask the guys to come in costume, but I thought that might not be a very good idea. But in which case, this is Daniel Boone in a big tie. I know the history of the weapons, and I know what the records say and who I dealt with, but Clarence, like me, but me in other regards, Clarence can tell you about the weapon by reading the weapon. And based on our discussions, first of all, this is a late 1700s barrel that has been swamped, and I'll let him explain it to you. It's converted from Flintlock. It's roughly caliber 31. It's restocked in maple using parts that were made by the Honecker gunsmith from Raleigh County. The upper two thimbles are not original, and this was owned by Squire Tony in Lincoln, Boone County. Came to us from a man named Richard Max Drake in Missouri. He gave us two weapons, and you'll see one over there, one of the cartridge weapons that is from him. So, Clarence, what do you think of this?
Well, like I said, as far as the swamp barrel goes, swamp barrels were mainly Red War, Golden Age. A little more amount of work. According to Gusler and those who pointed Williamsburg, they said that after the barrels were roughly made, they filed them. And if you work, you'll notice as you get up towards you, if you use a file, you'll ease up a little bit. So they believed that really that the swamp barrel was done by accident, but they realized that the light, the balance of it, was a lot of handwork. Now, when percussion guns came out, they were mass produced. And so you didn't have somebody hand making a swamp barrel. So the majority of all long rifles that you'll come across, even if they are percussion, if they're a swamped barrel, then there was a really good indication that that barrel is probably not past the 1810, something like that. Like I say, this has a light swamp. What we must swamp is wide at your breech, tapers down, and flares slightly at the muzzle. Now you've seen pictures of guns, you know, where they're like the big, that's more of a blunderbuss, and that was for a whole different reason. Like I say, this gun, like I said, probably originally was Flintlock, and had a good barrel. A lot of people, just as today, in the economy back then, you didn't throw anything away. You know, if you had anything, you used it over. The British were very well known for, people don't realize this, when the British, any of their arms got damaged, they had army surplus. And a lot of your local gunsmiths would go and buy butt plates, trigger guards, things like that, you know. Instead of paying to ship them all the way back to England, they just went to the local armory, and then once a year or twice a year, the armorer would sell parts. So you'll see a lot of early American guns with British parts on them. The majority of the American-made flintlocks all had European locks. A lot of people don't know that, or they think, but the majority of the Golden Age, the majority of the American long rifle, all had imported locks. Very few you had, which we do have the distinction of owning a Joseph Gulcher flintlock lock. That is,
we have two of them.
We have two of them. Joseph Gulcher, the Gulcher family were very famous for making locks, but percussion locks. They mass-produced percussion locks. It was only known that Joseph Gulcher made like 5 flintlock locks. We're the only ones, I guess, that have two guns that are still complete, that have the Joseph Culture Flintlock locks on. And that's something to see, that really is.
You can't see one of the locks.
Yeah. They covered it.
We also have a very rare piece of leather called a
Cow's knee.
lamb's knee.
Cow's knee.
Cow's knee.
Yeah.
Cow's knee. And it covers, it's made so that it bulges out and it covers the flintlock so that it doesn't get wet. Well, we have the two weapons on display, and because the cow's knee is as rare as the locks are, we've got one of them covered up with the cow's knee. I'm going to hand this to Brett. This is a flintlock pistol. Walk it around so people can see that. Clarence, walk the percussion lock around with him so people
Okay.
see the contrast between percussion, between flintlock and percussion cap lock. Now, the flintlock has a piece of chert in the jaws of the, on the cap lock is a hammer. And the thing that really made the flintlock was the fact that finally they got, in olden times, they attached the frizzen to the hand cover. So the frizzen is in one piece. So when you pull the trigger and the flint, the clamp fell against the steel, and put a shower of darts into the pan, and then fired the weapon. There is a bit of discussion and argument between various experts, and I read a book recently that says, and there's a delay between the flintlock and the charge going off in the barrel. Clarence doesn't agree, and neither do I. I think that when you squeeze that trigger and that thing goes off, it goes bang, all at once. I learned it the hard way one time. I gave a demonstration at Bennington Museum, and I was using black powder, and I filled the pan up, and I was watching what I was doing, and a bunch of school children. I didn't notice, though, that the pan is separated from the touch hole, and that some of the powder had ran down, some of the powder ran down, you gotta watch my English, down into the weapon. So when I squeezed it and went bang, nice cloud of smoke, and also there was a jet of fire that came out of that and singed all the hair off their arm. So you learn to be careful with the weapons. So the pistol is a reproduction. It's a reproduction of the Aaron Burr, Alexander Hamilton dueling pistols, which we have in our collection, and which wouldn't be here tonight. You can lay it down there. We wouldn't be using it tonight except to show off a flintlock, because after this, we're out of flintlocks. We're going all percussion. The next rifle, let's see, somebody else. Matt, your turn. We'll let Clarence sit down. I'm not going to have you guys do the same thing all the time. The second rifle, we've dated to 1825 to 30. It has a John Bishop Charlestown lock, and Clarence says late brass furniture. But what the donor didn't know was that the lock did not start out in life with this rifle. There was a different lock on it, and we took the rifle as being a West Virginia rifle based on the lock. One of the things that we over the mountain states are known for is that the side plate on our rifles have one screw and one plate. In Pennsylvania, they generally have two screws, and that brings up the question of what these rifles are. These are long rifles. The only reason anybody calls them Kentucky rifles is because of a poem written about the Battle of New Orleans, where all the Kentuckians went down to fight the British. And of course that rankles all the Pennsylvanians. Now the Pennsylvanians think that they made all the rifles, and that is, of course, isn't true. They were made in Pennsylvania and New York, Virginia, Western Virginia, the Carolinas, Georgia, Ohio, Tennessee, and I'm probably willing to bet into Indiana and Illinois too. I don't know of any long rifles made in Wisconsin. But then too, back in those days, I wasn't paying too much attention. But this is John Bishop of Charlestown. You can put that down. And then take the next one over there. This is a lock that's marked Ward Brothers. In this instance, the stock and the barrel were married up. We use that phrase, antique dealers use that phrase more than we do, but that's when you put two dissimilar things together. Not that they were joined together, they were married up. And the initials on the back of this side, on the side plate say ELB, and the donor was Herschel Burford. What do you think of this rifle, Clarence? I know what he said like 4 days ago, but we're going to see what he says now.
Well, you can tell, like I say, that it's because the fields here, originally a barrel is held in with tenons in the bottom of the barrel. And you can see that this barrel, they left the tenons in the barrel, but they married it up to an older stock, a stock that had been used. I mean, it wasn't like they restocked it. So that these tenons didn't match up, so they drilled new holes, and they filled the other holes in. Basically, it's a later style percussion because of the back of the lock, squared off, even though some of your English guns did have squared off backs. Like I say, it has the one side plate. On a flintlock, most flintlocks had 2 lock bolts to keep the pan, to pull the front of the lock plate and the rear of the lock plate, keep that very solid against the barrel, to make sure no powder leaks.
So it didn't happen to you like it happened to
Yeah,
me?
if it leaches behind the lock plate, there's a possibility, of an explosion. This has set triggers, which set triggers are always usually a later period. You won't find a lot of Golden Age guns with set triggers. Now, the earliest guns, the earliest ones to use set triggers were the Jaeger rifles that came out of Germany. But the rear trigger was never referred to as a trigger. It was referred to as a cocking lever, because you would pull the cocking lever and then you could cock the lock on the gun. But later on, in the flintlock era, when they used the set double triggers, as most gunsmiths refer to them, this was always referred to just as the set trigger or double trigger.
Good. Is that a nice rifle?
It's a very nice rifle. It's got some nice, most of the furniture, I think all the furniture is original. I think somebody took a couple guns, maybe 2 guns, and put them together. But it's a very nice gun. You see a difference here. Right here, you see a difference here, about almost where there would be another lock bolt, but it's not. It's just where the wood has removed. And you'll notice a lot of these guns in this area and back here, the wood's missing. More on percussion than flintlock, because Jim was discussing this about the fulminate in the caps was very corrosive, and over time it would eat the wood and it would eat the finish, and so that's where the wood would get damaged. It would get moisture and stuff in it. And so most your flintlocks, more had the fins around them and stuff like that, and the priming powder was not near as corrosive as the fulminate in your caps. So most percussions, if you find a percussion, just like this one here, even though this has been restocked, it was restocked a long time ago, probably in its use. The wood is still good. And most percussions that I have and other collections I've seen, that area is always eat away. Also.
If you look at the Boone rifle down in the museum, you discover that they actually put copper over that area because it was so eroded. Okay, Brett, your turn. The 4th rifle, this has a Philadelphia lock, a so-called back action lock. Notice that it's broken and repaired. I apologize to you that on a couple of weapons we have this wonderful repair called a zip strip. In that case, it keeps the trigger guard from falling off, and this one, it keeps it from falling apart completely. We're very conservative about what we do with weapons here. Although the experts, and no running down the experts, but by and large, we accept weapons the way they are. We're never going to shoot them, but we're going to display them and talk about them. And we're not certain that the people in the present know as much about the weapon as they should, and we don't think the people of the past knew as much as the people in the present. So consequently, over the last 100 years, we've accepted weapons, but we've never changed anything. Someday, maybe somebody will know so much that they can redo rifles, but for the moment, we're letting you see them the way they came to us. This rifle has a chance of being Pennsylvania, according to Clarence. Walk it out there so people can. Now, Clarence, tell us about the line. The line.
What you call the line or the architecture of the gun is very slim. A lot of your Pennsylvania rifles, from the bottom of the ramrod channel up, is more of a V. A lot of your other guns, North Carolinas, even Tennessee's, it's a little more rounded. Your Pennsylvania rifles, they were a lot more slender. You have a line that comes down from the back of the barrel. I just hold on and show you. So this one here, this one's got very good lines, but not like that one. You have a line, basically, that, and what I'm saying by line is you have a flow that comes down off the top of the gun, comes down and rolls into the wrist. Now, some Pennsylvania guns were done so well that you can almost actually visualize a line coming down here and one coming into where the cheek piece would be. This cheek piece, though, is a little different because it's got more of a square cheek piece, where the others have more rounded. But like I say, a lot of your Pennsylvania guns can be told, and that's how they date ones from different schools. Now, what we mean by different schools, there were different schools. People, well, you actually got a diploma. You actually had to have an apprenticeship. You actually had to be a journeyman. While you were out as a journeyman, you built a very nice rifle. You came back, and it's called a Meisterstroke, which masterpiece. And basically, it went before the guild, just like a union. It went before these gun makers' guilds, and they would look the gun over, and they would give you a diploma, just like at a college. And a lot of people, when they went into a gun shop, if they didn't see that hanging on the wall, they didn't want your gun. Of course, they wanted somebody they knew. You know, my life may depend on this. So you better be good. But what I'm saying by that is that different schools, in other words, we're talking, and Jim knows about Bucks County, Bedford, Albany, these different schools, so to speak, and what we're calling, they had their own style. You could look at a gun, in Pennsylvania, and that's true also in a lot of Appalachian guns too. You can tell North Carolina from South Carolina. You can tell a lot of Appalachian guns. You can, if you've seen enough of them, you can look at one and tell almost for fact that this gun came from probably Western Virginia, because each person had an individual way they worked something, just like an artist. Because these guys were artists, and like I say, you had lines about the gun that was very pleasing. Now, a lot of guns were almost done too delicate, and that's why you see a lot of original guns down in the forestock and here in the wrist. But you got to remember, this was a job. This was a person's livelihood, and like anything else, it depended on the customer. You know, the customer come in and this is what he wanted. I've seen, I guess, just to throw off a sliding wood patch box is something that was on early German guns. And when they come over into America and the German gunsmiths began to build American guns, some of the earliest known Flintlocks had sliding wood patch boxes. Well, then the brass patch box is strictly an American invention. I mean, we took the American gunsmiths, and these were German gunsmiths and Pennsylvania Dutch. They created this graceful, beautiful work of art, but they done brass. They've done ornamentation. But I've actually seen a gun that Dickert done, which was a very famous gunsmith. And it was dated. Our gun was actually dated like 1810, but it still had sliding wood patch marks. A lot of people would have looked at that and said that gun was old. But I tend to think, as other gunsmiths did, that whoever came in, that's all the money they had.
Now, on that very regard, in 1976, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania decided that they were going to make a bicentennial rifle. The Commonwealth, like this state, is blessed and cursed with purchasing procedures. And everybody is going to, the staff all has a big smile on their face. We all giggle about this because most people never know about the difficulty of the purchasing procedures until Governor Manchin tried to do something to the mansion, the Manchin mansion, and he actually said it to the paper. You know, we could get the things done a lot faster. We didn't have these archaic purchasing procedures. And we don't know if the public noticed it or not, but all the state employees got a good laugh out of it. But in Pennsylvania, when they put the bids out for this bicentennial rifle, the low bidder was from North Carolina. How many did they make? 100 of those rifles?
John Bivens.
They made 100, John Bivens made 100 North Carolina, Pennsylvania bicentennial rifles. And the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission all had egg on their face. And of course they didn't sell very well. Pennsylvanians didn't want to buy a North Carolina rifle, they wanted a Pennsylvania rifle. So at one point they had a new director at the State Museum, and they asked the director, would you like to have one of these rifles in the museum? And I said, no, I don't want one of those rifles in the museum. I want 24 of them. They said, 24? What are you going to do with 24 weapons? I said, well, I get you to buy the uniforms too, and we'll fit up a platoon of infantry. And we'll use them for reenactment, and we'll shoot them. And we'll shoot the bejeebers out of them, and we can get rid of these North Carolina rifles. And of course, they looked at that with a jaundiced eye, about the same way they did when they, we had a big meeting one time, and they were discussing the bicentennial wagon train. And they said, Jim, what do you think we should do with the bicentennial wagon train? I said, well, that's simple. You pour all of the wagons together in a valley there in Valley Forge, and you soak the whole works down with gasoline, and you fire a rifle grenade right into the middle of it, and burn the whole works up. And they said, why would we want to do that? I said, why would you want to preserve a bunch of fakes when you can't give good house room to the 13 wagons, original wagons you own? I lasted 4 years before they fired me. And then did the best thing that could ever happen. I became the curator of industry and technology, and I learned a lot more. I didn't learn tact, however. Matt, your turn. This rifle is, one day the telephone rang, and a lady said, would you like to have a Kentucky rifle? And of course, my prejudices weren't permitted to say anything, and I said, yes, of course I would. I'd love to have a Kentucky rifle. She said, well, good. I've got one, and I'll give it to you. So that afternoon, a gentleman came to the back door, carrying that rifle and a gun case. Brett, your turn. And in the gun case was this little junior fellow. Yeah, pick that one up. And we have fun joking about my second office. I have two offices in this building. One is my real office. It's only big enough for me because of all the stuff that's in it, and the books and computer and all. The rest of the time when I work with donors, I operate in the employee lunchroom. And so there we were with these two weapons, and the donor, and me, and Clarence. And we found out that what happened was that the man said that what his wife would do is she would get in her head she wanted something, and she'd go out and buy it. And she would live with it for a while until she got tired of it. And then she'd scrounge around for someplace to do it. And he said, "You were the lucky recipient this time. She gave you the rifle." I said, "That's a nice rifle. What's this?" And he said, "Oh, it's another rifle. She got that one too, and you can have that too." So here are these. Now that's a pretty nice rifle. 1840. Now, when it comes to these rifles, dating them is the luckiest thing in the world. They're all 1840, except for the first two and the last two. Everything's 1840, as luck would have it. Charles, Clarence, tell them about that rifle.
Oh, this one here. Yeah.
Where was that one made?
Basically, it's pretty much, you pretty much say this is an Appalachian style rifle. Mainly because one of the things is because the grease hole. Most Tennessee guns and even North Carolina guns, it was round. And they would keep grease in there, grease or patches. Most of the Appalachian guns we've seen that have been in Western Virginia have square. Now, what we tend to think is that I guess your people in North Carolina and Tennessee, they took the time to cut out round patches. We, on the other hand, we just rolled it up and greased it, stuck it in the hole, and when we got ready to load the gun, we'd plop it in there and take our knife and cut it off. We didn't pre-cut that. But most Appalachian guns, so we're 99% sure, especially also it's got the single screw, that this is definitely a Western Virginia gun. We're pretty sure it's probably built right here in the mountains, and it's in very good shape. The furniture is typical of what you would see Appalachian style rifle. The double triggers is a little step up. Most your Appalachian rifles were single triggers, but occasionally you would see some in the later period that would have the double triggers, and naturally that cost more. So this was made for someone who was probably a farmer or a merchant, someone who was fairly well-to-do when you consider how expensive one of these guns was. But like I say, this one's in pretty good shape. You see it has been damaged around the stock here because of the formite. But
what West Virginia county was that site made in?
well, you know, that is one thing about the site. The site is more of a Pennsylvania style, but now it could have been very well copied. But yeah, this site is more what we said about Bucks County. More likely a lot of your early Bucks County rifles. The sights were very low, very wide, and they have two little notches here. Most Appalachian sights were a little narrower, and they might even have what they call a buckhorn. You see a lot of modern guns with these little notches, they almost come up. And some of them I've seen some almost meet into a circle, which could have been an idea of a scope. But yeah, the sight was copied. I believe the sight's original to the gun, simply because most early guns that you'll see that's been in somebody's possession for a long period of time, is you'll see maybe the sight started here, and then as the person's eyes changed, you see where the sight was moved up and down the barrel to get a better picture.
You were just talking about.
I've had to do that. but well, like I say, but we are 90. I mean, between me and Jim, we're 99% sure this is, you know, like I say, a good wrought iron barrel. That this is probably.
It's a Mason Dixon line.
Yeah, definitely. And if you notice, it's got the right architecture. In fact, if you look down here, you can see the line. You can actually see the line coming down the stock here. You see the line coming down the stock here. This was built. I'd love to know who done it, because the gunsmith was very good. This guy was very good on his architecture, on his styling. I'd love to find out who it was, because more than likely for a person to build a gun this fine, there definitely should be more of his work out there, you know. But and what I'm saying, I'm not saying because of vanity, but a lot of them did not sign guns.
So why is that two triggers?
It's interesting they didn't sign guns, but they did sign other things, and they advertised frequently. Coppersmiths in particular said, "I sign my work and I warrant it to be good." Gunsmiths don't do that.
A lot of the guns, the majority of guns come out of Pennsylvania, you will see INRI on the barrels, especially those built by Moravians, a lot of the Quakers, Jesus from Nazareth, King of the Jews. And some would sign their name on the bottom of the barrel, or they would put their initials. The question you had about the double triggers, basically it was just to be able to set to the pull. You know, you pull the back trigger. Now you got to remember, in a lot of your percussion locks, the later period, there was not a half-cock notch on the tumbler. Now on a flintlock, there was always a half-cock notch. And you would pull that back, and that was your safety. Because most of the time you just had a single trigger. That was your safety. You flipped the frizzen open, you put your powder in, and you could walk through the woods, the gun was fine. Then you pulled it back to full cock, pulled the trigger. A lot of percussions did not have half-cock. Basically, it was either full cock or it was resting against the nipple. So a lot of what they would do, this hammer could not be set until that rear trigger was cocked back. And once the rear trigger was cocked back, then you could pull it back and put the cap on there. And you could carry it around like that, even though to me that's a little dangerous. Because a lot of these triggers, if you'll notice the screws, the screw here and screw here. Okay, the first screw was for the pull on this trigger. How light? You've heard people say a hair trigger. You could adjust this down to where it was a hair trigger. The second screw basically adjusted the tension on the spring for your rear trigger. So basically it was just a target, or you buy a truck today with all the bells and
You
whistles.
certainly wouldn't want to go off half-cock.
And that's where that term came from. It's lock, stock, and barrel, going off half-cock. Basically, and that's what it meant was, you know, the gun went off half-cock, in other words, it didn't hold safety.
Now, we'd have more fun shooting that if we had a lock, wouldn't we, Brett? No lock on that one.
She's got a question.
Yeah, so the lady who gave it to you referred to it as a Kentucky rifle. So is it a Western Virginia, Pennsylvania style Kentucky rifle, or is it more appropriately called something else?
Yes. No. Maybe.
It's a West Virginia gun.
We don't, there's a good book on Western Virginia rifles. They're all pretty rifles. The closest thing to pretty we have is this.
It's that one there. Well, the other one's down in the, well, yeah. There's a reason why the pretty gun survived.
I got standing up. Show all the pieces. You got trigger guard, you've got patch box, you've got the lock was what I was saying, you've got thimbles, you've got decorative plates around the pins, and once you start out with a plain piece of brass, all it can do is get prettier and prettier and prettier. They made them decorative, and this whole business of making masterpiece type guns after the Revolution, when things got better, after the new nation was more stable. Remember, the Constitution said that you cannot levy a tax on income. So people made lots of money. If they made money, they could keep it. They could spend it on things that they wanted to. They didn't have to pay taxes on their income. And now we test your recent history. When was that part of the Constitution repealed?
World War I.
Huh?
World War I.
No.
Woodrow Wilson signed it, didn't
Roosevelt in the Depression, about 1933, that they repealed the part of the Constitution said you can't tax income. So since then,
Well, didn't they tax during the Civil War?
he? World War I know of. Woodrow Wilson was
the Civil War.
Said he wished he hadn't done it.
Well, if it was actually Civil War, it was only briefly,
Yeah.
but it was also unconstitutional. So that, these are the guns, the pretty guns, are the ones you can pin down. These workaday rifles, because people came and went, people didn't just stay by their own fireside after the new nation. People moved around and went west and wanted to have a better way of life. So the styles of guns get mixed up together. I'm sure that in Kentucky, they call them Kentucky rifles. We say Western Virginia. Now, you have to understand that in this agency, it's a conceit. After 1863, this is West Virginia. Before 1863, this is Western Virginia. Now that we're a separate state, the people who live on the other side of the mountain, right up to the mountain, refer to themselves as Western Virginians. As far as we're concerned, they're all Eastern Virginians. Once you get over the watershed of that mountain, you're in the Old Dominion. There's nothing west about it, it's all east.
A lot of the fancy guns too, as like we was talking, it'd be like anything else you buy today. A gun was very expensive. A gun could run anywhere $14, $18, maybe $25. That was a lot of money back then. If you had money, you were going to show it off. And so a lot of your fancy guns basically have existed because they, like Jim said, they weren't everyday guns. These people lived in affluent houses. They were, merchants, maybe very successful farmers, whatever. And shooting matches, which we'll get into that on the last gun. Shooting matches was a very, very prominent thing. This was done, like every other week. I mean, there were shooting matches. And a lot of guys would have a really fancy gun. It'd be like you going out to a car show and you having all the bells and whistles on your car. It's the same thing. They would show up with these really fancy guns. And maybe they couldn't shoot, but mine looks better than yours. And that was a lot of the mentality. And so a lot of your fancy guns existed because they weren't used.
Mr. Van Bibber went to the shoots, and he carried a converted flintlock to percussion lock, and it was no secret who owned that gun originally, that gun was owned by Daniel Boone. And he said it over and over and over again. And in 1906, that rifle came here, and been here ever since.
We have the best paper trail of any because Boone, when he lived here in Kanawha Valley, or Kanawha City, really basically across from Campbell's Creek, I think it was pretty much in that area, not in a cave up there on the hill that they covered up before. Boone hunted all the way up into New River over in Boone County. In fact, it's referred to now as Rock Creek, originally was Daniel Boone Parkway. And that was from Hernshaw all the way over into Madison. That was Daniel Boone Parkway. In fact, there's people that still have signs in their yard and stuff that say Daniel Boone Parkway. But Boone had a trading business along with the Van Bibbers down at Point Pleasant. And Boone served in the legislature and everything here in Charleston. And he would go down, and they would do business.
Wait. He served in the House of Burgesses in Richmond.
In Richmond, yeah.
He was the first representative from the Kanawha district.
From the Kanawha district. Even one of his sons ended up marrying a Van Bibber, or his daughter married. But anyway, when he got ready to leave, he traded. Now he left here, went to Kentucky for a little while to visit his family, and then he went to Missouri. When he left here, he traded the rifle for a team of oxen. And there was even a bill of sale. Daniel Boone was not illiterate like Goggles. He was a very, very noble person. But there was even a bill of sale drawn up, and I think the Van Bibber family had it for a long time. But anyway, it has one of the best paper trails. You've got all these museums all over the country, especially in Pennsylvania, say we have Daniel Boone's rifle because it's got DB on the barrel. And yet, if you do your research, you'll find that there was a very prominent gunsmith out of Lancaster area by the name of Daniel Border. And he had a lot of apprentices. Border kept slews of apprentices. And what Border would do, his apprentices would start building the gun, and when they got to a certain stage, Border finished it, stamped DB on the barrel, and they went out. Border done quite a few committee of safety. He always got committee of safety contracts there in Pennsylvania, and they'd order 100 rifles at a time, and he'd deliver them in a month. You know, so a lot of the guns, long rifles that you see, a lot of them, and I'm not questioning, I'm just saying if it's got DB on the barrel, more than likely it was made by Daniel Border, and not Daniel Boone. Even though Daniel Boone's brother Squire was a very accomplished gunsmith himself.
Okay, move on. Clarence, what about this little bitty rifle?
Now, which, you mean this little piece
No,
here? This one here?
that one there.
Well, I believe it was originally probably a hog gun that had probably been damaged and was cut down. Even after modern guns come out, they still kept a hog gun. And in Pennsylvania, it's referred to as a schmeal, which meant barn gun. In the Appalachians, they did have a gun. It usually set in the corner, or it's set in the barn, and it was referred to as a hog gun. Pennsylvania referred to as a barn gun. We referred to as a hog gun. Why? It was used to kill the hog. You know, in the fall when they got ready to kill and scald the hogs, they would use one. And I don't know if it was just a tradition. Even after cartridge guns come out, they still had ones that done it.
Well,
Now,
we use the favorites for it.
yeah. Basically, this has had a different sight. As you'll notice, there is a rear sight here and a rear sight here. So that tells me that this was a long gun at one time. And the sights were moved because evidently the owner's eyesight changed over years. That happens to some people, you know. So they have to move the rear sight. I believe the gun, like I say, I believe the gun was sort of pieced together, what was left of it. The butt plate is not
You're being kind. It says here, an old short homemade gun fixed up to shoot, non-original butt plate and crude trigger guard. The nose cap is more lead than pewter.
More lead than pewter. Yeah, your pewter would have a little shiny to it. I was being nice to the people, you know. May they rest. Anyway, your pewter nose caps, and you know real pewter, you know, it's gray, but it's still a little bit shinier. If you didn't have a lot of pewter, they'd mix lead with it, mix more lead. This is more gray, so this probably got more lead in it.
Now, contrary to what he's saying, in proper pewter, there is no lead.
Well,
In
it's
England, a pewterer who put lead in pewter was taken to the public executioner, and his left hand was amputated with an axe.
but
Terrible crime to do.
here it ended up. There was
Yeah, this is the oldest one-handed pewterer's game.
this gun, like I say, I believe was basically an old family gun passed down, and somebody tried to restock it to keep it. It's got double triggers, which were probably added to it simply because double triggers were a little more of an expense, and if you spent money on a double set triggers, more than likely you probably would have bought a better trigger guard, you know. So we believe it was just sort of scrapped together. Probably the only thing that's really, really old is the barrel itself. An old wrought iron barrel. You see the wrought iron was soft. Contrary to what most people believe, barrels were not drilled out. They started as a U. Take a big flat piece of metal, big flat scalp of wrought iron. They would start in the middle. They would heat it up, bring it around, do a forge weld, and they would put the whole barrel together. They'd done that, and then once that was done, they would straighten the barrel. Then they would ream it and rifle it, because wrought iron is fairly soft. A lot of hog guns got dropped and ended up being bent, so they were cut off. And also, over time, shooting this gun would wear the rifling out. Now, the better barrels that were made after they got the barrel done, after it was totally bored, rifled, breeched, and everything, they would dig a pit, and they would fill it full of hot ashes, and they would fill it full of charcoal, ground up leather, ground up bone. This created carbon. And they would lay the barrel in there and then cover it back up with the same stuff, and then cover it with dirt and let it cook overnight. And this carbon went into the metal and made it carbon steel, and that made it look strong. That's probably more Pennsylvania. It was probably done here by the better gunsmiths. That one gun back there, you look, the barrel's in very good shape, the bore looks in very good shape. A really fine gun from Western Virginia. More than likely, that gun was probably carbonized, as it was referred to back then. A lot of the other guns, it's debatable. And a lot of guns, you'll see a lot of early rifles, and they'll say, well, they're smoothbore. Well, the reason they're smoothbore, the rifle was shot.
The man who owned this rifle,
This one here.
This one
here.
yeah, that one, told me that his grandfather bought it from somebody for $2 and a plug of tobacco. And
Was it Bell Pouch?
of course it was there. No, it was a plug of tobacco.
Oh, well, didn't they make one?
I did make a plug.
Yeah, that's what.
I don't know. I don't
You got a
know.
bunch of plugs down there?
We have all sorts of plugs on us. Oh, why in the world is this all that black metal? What do they do to the brass on this one?
In the early era of the guns, brass was hard to get. In fact, there was even a law saying you could not import unworked brass in America, in the colonies. Also, iron was a little hard to come by. So all that iron was used for was to make the barrel and the lock and the trigger. In other words, that was the most expensive part. And brass was basically had to be unworked. In other words, it had to be from recycled. This gun goes naturally into a later period because you see this was after we began to do our own refineries, which we, as Jim said before, we had a lot of refineries. By the American Revolution, we had a lot of refineries, producing a lot of iron.
In 1770, we were the third producer in production of iron in the world, and you have to guess who numbers 1 and 2 are. Who made the most iron in 1770 in the world? Russia. And the second highest producer was Sweden. We were third, and the mother country was fourth. There were 80 ironworks in the colonies in 1770. 60 of them were in Pennsylvania. At the end of the war in 1783, there was not a single iron facility standing with one brick on top of the other. The British Army knocked down every single one of them, and we had to start over.
They felt if they destroyed our ironworks, which was a good idea. If they destroyed our ironworks, they destroyed the rifle manufacturing. Of course, we had these people called the French that said, "We'll give you guns." So they sort of, contributed to it. But like I say, this is a later period, but this is a very nice gun to be. Most of your iron-mounted guns, you're looking at North Carolina, Tennessee, are rather plain. This gun's rather fancy. It's got a lot of carving. It's got some file work on the butt plate.
Walk.
Okay.
Walk and talk.
Walk and talk. Okay.
Show
You'll see the
that
file work.
File mark is so tiny you can't see it.
File work, the little edges there, and you see it's here on the trigger guard. They got little lines they've cut here into the, basically even into the thimbles. You even see it duplicated here, even on the nose cap. It's got a iron nose cap, and you see the little file work, the little grooves and everything. This was a very well-made gun. You see the entry thimble here is all the way down the stock. Now, a lot of your Pennsylvania guns, they had a brass wear plate. Well, this guy, he just basically just run the iron all the way down here, because over time you're going to shoot this gun like this. So over time, this area here is going to get the most from your hands, from oil, grease, dirt. This is what's going to be wore. And you'll see a lot of original guns where this has been busted. So a lot of your fancy guns, they would put a brass wear plate. But this person, very ingenious, basically just brought this all the way down and reinforced this area. A lot of them would run the tang. They'd run the tang way down here. A lot of your Appalachian guns, they'd run the tang all the way down here. Because this was basically an area that could be damaged. This was a weak area in the stock. So they would run the tang all the way down, and then they would run the trigger plate all the way down and bolt them together. It would sandwich that in here and make it very strong. Oh, the lock plate. No, they didn't do any fancy engraving on the side plate.
I'm surprised it doesn't have.
Yeah, you'd think it quite possibly may have been a store-bought lock. Probably was a store-bought lock. And
It
they
may have
just,
been replaced.
yeah, and it's possible it could have been replaced. But like I say, you see the file work on it, and this is a really nice gun compared to the average Appalachian style gun. But it's got a lot of Appalachian architecture, so. But it's got some, well, we think it's got some North Carolina influence to it too, a little bit. We're not going to give the Carolinas that much credit, you know. So you can see the little, and that's they just took a file and made a few little grooves. Same way on the butt plate, same way here up on the nose cap. I mean, that was just a little more work, but it really made the gun stand out.
Okay. Great. You get the next one. There was a guy named Thomas Larrabee who was born in Boone County. He lived there for a long time. His parents decided that things were better in Indiana, and when Thomas was 3 months old, they moved to Indiana. He grew up, he enlisted in a Union regiment in the Civil War. He fought in the West. He never fought in the Eastern theaters at all. And at the end of the war, he took home that rifle musket. He used it for whatever he used rifle muskets for, shooting deer, hogs, and two-legged predators. When he died, his son got the musket. When he died, the grandchildren got it. The grandchildren, who didn't have any appreciation for it, said, "What are we going to do with this old gun?" And somebody else said, "Well, Grandpa always said he was from West Virginia. Why don't we offer it to the West Virginia State Museum?" Well, you know what happened. We took it. I was not here. Now, excuse me of being acquisition, but it was 1986 that it came to us. And somewhere along the line, somebody gave it a coat of varnish. Now, varnish is a very bad thing to do with guns, but it's a very good thing to do to old museum objects, because it means that most of the time, you can handle that thing with your bare hands. You don't have to wear white gloves. The reason we wear white gloves is to keep from getting our fingers on the objects, but that one you can handle. That musket has been in more displays, carried around more places. If we do a Civil War days at Jenkins Plantation, that's the musket that goes on. Why isn't it downstairs on display? Because it doesn't have a West Virginia history. It hasn't got any history as far as we're concerned, except we have more darn fun with it. Also, it's a fairly unusual model for the Civil War. Well, Civil War buffs won't say this, but it's called the Special Model 1861, and you can see how flat the straps are on it. They're not curved. This isn't your typical Springfield musket, although it was made in Springfield at the Springfield Armory in 1862 and is so marked. Okay, that's that.
Okay.
I'm trying to move along a little bit because I know the clock's getting away from me.
Caliber, what was caliber one? Is that a 58?
58. No.
58. That was a common caliber. A lot of your calibers today are actually based on military smoothbores. 12 gauges based on 75 caliber ground beds.
The thing that they didn't realize when they started the Civil War is that when they rifled the muskets and made them into the rifle musket, it has very shallow rifling. And with the mini ball, they created a weapon that was much longer range than they were used to. Their tactics were to march everybody on the battlefield 30 yards apart and blast away with what they considered to be the equivalent of a smoothbore musket. But that ain't no smoothbore musket. That's a rifle musket. It has a maximum effective range well in excess of 500 yards. In the hands of an ordinary soldier, he could kill somebody at 200 yards with it. In the hands of an expert, he could pick an officer off at 500 yards. And you wonder why the great death tolls. It's got a catalog number on the trigger guard. It's got a catalog number on the inside of the lock. And the stock sort of just kicked around. I don't know if there's a number on the butt plate or not. No, the butt plate never got off the weapon. So I thought, gee, what in the world does that lock plate say? WHEELIN. Wheeling? Really? And then it says R. Dover. Well, the records say that the donor consulted with Professor Whisker, who's the main scholar on Western Virginia rifles, and said that it should either go to New Bedford or it should stay in West Virginia. Well, the pieces were in a bag and they gave it to us. I came along and I put the full thing together and then learned, why does it look so stupid? It's half stock. And my expert, you know my expert? My expert says, this is nothing but a hanger. They assembled all the pieces with this bone-looking stock so they could put it over the mantle and keep the pieces together. We should probably do what they did originally at the Edgar Allan Poe birthplace in Baltimore when they didn't have enough furnishings. So they went to your local unpainted furniture place, bought a lot of furniture, painted it white, and furnished the house with it. And the people would come and say, why have you got all this white furniture? And they said, that's not furniture, those are ghosts. If you have a piece of Poe furniture in your house, we'd love to have it. So gradually over the years, they furnished that house with authentic furnishings. We should probably paint this stock white because it's a ghost. The only thing that matters is the barrel, the lock, and then of course it's got a nice, modern, brilliant nipple on it. No, modern nipple. Now, Clarence, it's your turn. Tell us about Mr. Large and Mr. Fadley.
Oh, okay. This is probably the newest gun as far as muzzle loaders go in our collection.
At first I thought this gun was bad because some guy just made it out of a flat board of wood.
Didn't understand.
Never mounted grounding anything.
Since, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but since everybody looks to be about my age, how many of you remember Sergeant York, the movie Sergeant York? Okay, you remember the shooting match. Okay, this was a target gun. It was made strictly for that. Over-the-log matches. These over-the-log matches were held up in Appalachia long past, anywhere else. William Large was a very, very prominent, well-made, well-known barrel maker in Ohio. Any gun that's got one of his barrels on it command premium prices. Now he has some grandchildren who are still making gun barrels, but I'm not sure the quality. I haven't really talked to a lot of people. This gun was probably built by Bill Large, we all refer to him as Bill, probably around 1960. It's pretty much 1960 style as to what would have been produced back then. This gun was made to lay over a log, to lay on a flat block, and a lot of the matches were prone, and they would lay down, and there would be a log or a block, and they would lay down, and this would be placed on it. Like say, whoever I guess he probably built this for the person, or maybe he just made the barrel. But Bill did make some guns, and they are collector guns. But like I say, the style of the gun is definitely, like I say, I wouldn't put it past 1960, maybe a little bit earlier. but it's an over-the-log target gun. You'll notice here the bowl. Now, this was done on a lot of percussion guns, especially in the later period. This bowl caught fulminate. This kept it from eating out the wood, you know, which the better made caps, but even better made caps didn't come along until later on, because those that made caps, CCI, Remington, even Dynamite Noble, even though Dynamite Noble from Europe is for the people who have invented dynamite. Noble did. Anyway, they didn't use as much corrosive powder, but percussion caps produced in America up until probably the late 60s, early 70s, were still made with the old fulminate, and they still were corrosive. So a lot of people,
but not the primers
but
on
not
cartridges.
the primers on cartridges. The thing about it was,
They
a lot of
changed
people,
in 1926.
a lot of people, you know, shot cartridge arms, you know, so they didn't want, you know, that this was, it was all money, just money. You know, percussion caps was just something these people done on the side. But anyway, they were still produced with the old fulminate. So you see a lot of percussion guns with this, and a lot of times you'll see one that's not as pronounced as this. But like I say, it's basically just a target gun that would have been taken out. It's got set triggers, which most naturally, your target guns would have had set triggers, which want the least amount of pull, least amount of flinch, or pull it, which you never, shooter will tell you never pull the trigger, you squeeze the trigger. You know, and a lot of people have a habit of squeezing the trigger right here, when really the trigger is supposed to be touched with the very tip of your finger. You don't cock your finger and pull back. You use the tip and, you know, and do that. Why?
How do you pull the trigger?
You use the tip of your.
Nowadays, people are taught to press the trigger,
Well,
not squeeze the trigger.
yeah, but if you press it, you might be pressing forward.
Oh, they're smart.
It won't go off. Well, we're not that, we're no smarter than that, you don't need to have a gun. Anyway, yeah, there are some people, but like I say, this basically was a target rifle. You gotta remember,
No.
there is,
While he's doing that,
there-
pick up
there-
the shotgun.
there is a slight cast.
That was made for a specific thing.
For a
This is
specific
a Model
person,
12,
which I
Winchester
don't
Model 12 shotgun, and this is not a sawed-off shotgun. This is an intentionally made riot gun. And when I read the list of the donors, you should have chuckled in a few places, because one of the donors I mentioned is the Bureau of Corrections. We possess the Bureau of Corrections historic armory. Of our 220 weapons that we own, 110 of them are from the Bureau of Corrections. We own several racks of revolvers, and we own about 30 long arms. And they're kind of neat to have, because not many museums have, not many people have, authentic riot guns, and we have about 20 of them. I brought this up because I happen to like Winchesters, but this is the only Model 12, but there are a number of other makes of riot guns. Lots of them say property of the U.S. government, which they were made in World War II and used. We broke the Geneva Convention. Germany took us to task in World War I because we armed our assistant machine gunners with shotguns. If you got close enough to our machine guns, the assistant gunners would take care of you with a shotgun. I thought it was interesting one time a few years ago to see a picture of Baghdad, to see a Marine walking along carrying a pump shotgun on his hip. The shotgun still exists in the armed forces. Please note I don't use the word military. It's an adjective, not a noun. Okay, that's that one. Okay, who's next? Matt? Pick up the one that has the extra magazine hanging down. One of the donors that's mentioned in our list is Richard Maxstroff. And Dr. Richard Maxstroff, who's a professor of dentistry at WVU, is married to a woman whose ancestry has the funny name Hatfield. And she doesn't like much being in Hatfield, and her children don't either. And her mother-in-law lives with them, and she wanted to hang on to all the Hatfield memorabilia that they had. But Dr. Maxwell said, look, if you're going to keep the things together, you've got to donate those things to the State Museum. So they donated 25 objects, but not that one. That one was donated by a man named James Merle Carter, but that was owned by William Cap Hatfield. This is one of the feuding Hatfields. It's a model 1905 Winchester, autoloader, semi-automatic, chambered for 32 something or other.
Self-loading.
32?
Self-loading rifle, probably SLR.
What?
Probably self-loading rifle, SLR, something like that. Various calibers.
Okay, that's that.
I think that's 30 Winchester centerfire. Ain't that a 30? Ain't that a 30? I thought it said WCF. Is that the one that's got WCF on? 30
WCF? No, that's the Marlin that says
Oh,
that.
that's the Marlin?
Now, the next one. Brett, the next one is the Marlin. The Marlin was owned by Jim Vance Jr. Jim Vance Sr. is the original bad boy in Hatfield boy Feud. And this was owned by his son, and it had its claim to fame is that this was used at the Battle of Blair Mountain. And on the right side of the stock, there are 3 so-called notches for senior moment. What's the name of the detective agency? Phelps?
Phelps. Yeah.
Phelps something.
Baldwin Phelps.
Phelps Dodge. So they got some of the enemy with this. This is chambered for 30-30 Winchester, and it's a Marlin under action. Next one. The saddle ring carbine. Yeah. This was owned by a man, Dr. Sam Stone Jr., who received it from the United States Army so that he could protect himself in the southern coal fields from irate miners. What he didn't admit to the Army is he wasn't worried so much about them being irate as he was worried about taking care of their health. And he is one of the founders of Women's and Children's Hospital here in Charleston. That's that one. Next one. The other Winchester. Yeah. Okay. Matt, pick up the first one that Brett's just had. We're going to play Winchester games. Nowadays, the Winchester, Model 94 Winchester is the short version. But originally, the Model 1894 was made as a rifle as well as a carbine. The one on the left here is the rifle, and the one on the right is the carbine. Chambered for 30-30 Winchester. And one of the first, if not the first, weapon to be made exclusively for nitro powder, for smokeless powder. Most Winchester arms that date from the 19th century are made from black powder, and then we went into all that crazy period when we weren't sure how much power the new cartridges really had compared to the black powder cartridges. But these are made for smokeless powder. Okay, that's those. What's left? Oh, Sean Morrison's Stevens. In some respects, this is one of the most common rifles that anybody sees. You see a lot of these used?
Absolutely, yeah.
I never see them used. They must go. And they bring good prices too. Yeah. This is Stevens' favorite. It's a single shot rifle with a dropping breech block. This one is nice and safe to have around the house because it doesn't have a firing pin. But it's chambered for 32 short rimfire. The reason why the Morrisons gave it to us is that they wanted to see it preserved and not go floating around, because its serial number is 453. And it's a model of 1894, so this one's made in 1894, or probably 1895, the latest little fellow. Okay. The revolver, that revolver, our favorite, my favorite gun selling establishment is selling one of these currently used that is sort of Parkerized. This is the Liberty model. This is a Smith & Wesson revolver that was made to be given and lend lease to Great Britain during World War II. This one's kind of added fun. Inscribed on it, it has 2A. Well, the corrections collection is interesting because corrections are what some of us call a poor sister agency. There are rich agencies in state government, and there are poor agencies. We all know because we all work for a poor agency. This is a poor agency, not a rich agency. Things like the museum depend upon donations, right? We don't buy things. Well, corrections is a poor agency, but the state police is a rich agency. And every so often, the state police gets a new handgun, and they buy a whole slew of handguns. And what do they do with their old ones? They give them to corrections. That's fine. Next time they get a new weapon, what do they do with the old ones? They give them to corrections. Well, what does corrections do with the ones they have? Do they surplus them? No, they don't. They put them in their historical armory, which came to us in 2001. So this pistol, this revolver has on a 2A, which was the rack number for the state police. When we did an exhibit here a couple of years ago about state police things, it was interesting that there weren't any weapons. And I said, don't you have any weapons? No, there are no antique weapons in the state police. I said, oh, that's interesting. But I didn't tell them the truth. All of their antique weapons are down in the vault down here. We got all the old weapons. Next one. Oh, not yet. That's the last one. That one there, yeah. This is a Gavilando Spanish semi-automatic, the so-called buffalo pistol. It's actually done. They say it's a buffalo. It looks more like a horned sheep to me. But this was owned by Aunt Jenny Wilson, and they did a film on her one time, and she had was sitting in her chair, and she had the pistol. They said, now, when you're ready to shoot this segment, we'll knock the bottles off the fence, and you pretend you're shooting. She said, you mean like this? She said, bang, 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 bang. He said, well, I guess we'll just use you as the actress ourselves. But this was the pistol that did it. 32 caliber, made by, let me read it, what it says. It says Gavilando. Gavilando and Company at Ibar, Spain.
Why does that not have
I think they sawed it off so it was easier for her to handle. Not considered a good idea, but if you know what you're doing with a pistol and you're not going to shoot your grandson, Roger Bryant, it probably doesn't hurt anything. The next weapon is that great, this one here. This one. It's probably a good idea to find out if it's empty or not. This one belonged to that merchant in Logan named Anderson Hatfield. And this is the model 1905 United States Marine Corps Colt, chambered for 45 ACP. It's number, I think the Marine number is 799, but it's Anderson Hatfield's revolver. Now, this one, this belonged to Emma Mills Smith. This is a Smith & Wesson. No, it's not. It's a Crucialegui Hermanos from Agar. It's Spanish again. But Emma Mills Smith was the first policewoman in Charleston. And they said also the first policewoman in West Virginia. She always claimed that she wasn't armed, but she had this in her purse. So she didn't carry the holster, but it was in her purse. That's that one. Next one is that one. Oh, you can hold it. This is a Smith & Wesson. What's fun about this one is that Dr. Samuel Stone had them engrave his name on it. So this is his revolver that he had before the Army gave him that rifle to protect himself from irate miners. It's a lemon squeezer. You had to hold it and squeeze the stock to release the safety to shoot it. I think that maybe Smith & Wesson didn't know about transfer bar safeties. I think the original patent, I might be wrong, the original patent for that was held by Harrington and Richardson. And back in the last decade, Ruger made a great thing about converting all their old style revolvers to transfer bar. I think that the patent died, and of course Harrington and Richardson had died too, and they didn't renew it. It became like public domain. But that's the story of that one. Okay, that was let's do the next. Let's do the gold-plated one. Who gets to hold the gold-plated revolver? Some poor state employee. Yeah. This had walking around. This is a Ruger Blackhawk. This was ordered by some admirer of Governor Manchin, who had never heard of the Ethics Act of 1989, which we all live with, and this agency benefits from too. And the Ethics Act says that a state employee cannot accept an object worth more than $25. If he does, or she does, or accept a meal. You can accept a meal worth that costs more than $25. So if somebody wants to take you to Lowry's and treat you to a $100 meal, you can accept that. But you can't accept a thing. So he gave this revolver to Governor Manchin, and Governor Manchin had it for about 2 years, and then became the senator. And the Ethics Act stipulates that all such gifts revert to the state. And in this instance, the state is the Division of Culture and History, and the Division of Culture and History's main place that things are kept is the State Museum. And so for a great while, I had the fun of keeping this underneath my desk. It lives in an attaché case, a plush-lined attaché case. Yes, that is gold. Now, let me take it. I get to play with it, too.
You're all holding.
Really, the fun thing is on the back strap it says, "A free people ought to be armed." Here it says West Virginia, the mountain state. Here's Governor Manchin's portrait. On the top it says, this side it says wild, wonderful West Virginia with suitable scrolls and foliage. On this side it says Governor Joe Manchin, and it has flags, and I think the state seal. It has the flag, excuse me, I'm going to put it on half cock. It has the flag of the United States, and it has some semblance of the state seal on it. And on top, it says one of one. So that's Governor Manchin's revolver. And then, last but not least, is that one. This was given to us by a lady from Arizona, and this had belonged to Samuel Dudding Thompson. And they were here doing some things to archives, and I was called up from downstairs, and they handed it to me, and I took it out of the holster. I said, "Oh, it's a former stock." They all looked at me like I was crazy. "Oh, what?" "It's a Fromer stock. It was invented, designed by a guy named Fromer, and it was made by that unpronounceable place in Budapest, Magyar, Budapest, and then it says Fromer, patented, stop, caliber 7.65. Apparently, the word stop in Hungarian and the word stop in English means the same thing. So this is the Fromer stop. It stopped you. Well, it's an interesting pistol because it's overbuilt. It's actually, they built it with the idea of ultimately expanding the caliber to 9mm or 10mm, and its main spring is up here in a housing on top. This one cocks, but when you work the action, it's very, 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 very heavy. That's that. And that's it. Any questions? Thank you. Thank all of you guys for the help.
The Model 94 Winchesters there, those are the ones that throws the shell straight up out of the top of it, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah, I think that's the top.
That's the part of the scope one.
Yeah, they changed it because people kept wanting scopes on, but it was,
Oh, is that what they changed?
yeah, they changed it because you couldn't put a scope on it.
They didn't change it because guys at the forest were tempted to wear a steel pot because of all that hot grass on their bald heads.
The Hatfield pistol, was that one that was used during the time of the feud?
Was that?
The pistol, did you say that was one of the Hatfields?
Dead Lance's pistol.
The Hatfield?
The revolver there, yeah. Was it used during the time of the feud?
No. There are no weapons in our collection that are, I use the word bloody, no bloody weapons, with the exception of, the possible exception of the double-barrel shotgun downstairs that's Remington model 1889. The feud, in the eyes of the historians, lasted from 1882 to one guy says to me 1888, and then he forgets that the trial was actually held in 1889, but for the shooting of Alistair McCoy. There is, by the way, a very interesting letter that we just received. Dr. Mextroth came in and he had a scrapbook that was made in memory of Anderson Browning, Joseph Anderson Browning, who was a reporter on the Logan Manor and who died at the age of 37 of pneumonia some years ago. And his brother put together this scrapbook. In the scrapbook, there's a letter from Dr. McCoy, a dentist in Huntington, to another party who was a great-grandson of Anderson Hatfield. And he says in the letter that Anderson Hatfield was not the bad guy in the feud. The bad guy was Jim Vance. And that when they killed Jim Vance, that stopped the feud. Unfortunately, the word never really trickled down to the Hatfields and McCoys, so they've been worrying about the feud ever since. Rose Hatfield Browning had a .38 revolver, and her children didn't know that she was armed, but they always knew that her purse was heavy. Couldn't understand why Mother's purse was so heavy. Well, she had a revolver in the purse. She carried a revolver for a lot of years. They have revolvers downstairs. So that's one of the fine weapons they carry. I'm still keeping my ears open, and I think I know where there's a Star revolver that was in the Feud. The party who owns it, however, can't get any benefit from an income tax deduction because he lives in Canada, and the weapon is in Canada. And he wants it to come here, but he does want a sum of money for it, and I don't quite know where the sum of money is going to come from.
The Hatfields were, right after the feud, you know, had died down and everything, you still had a lot of people coming into Logan, coming in that area, wanting to know about the feud and the people. So, well, the Hatfields were notorious for going around to hardware stores and gun shops and buying up every junk gun they could get.
They sold them.
And sold. People would say, they said, well, they weren't lying to them. They said, this is an authentic Hatfield gun. They did own it. They may only have owned it for 5 minutes, but they did own it. So you have a lot of guns floating around through the years saying, well, this belonged to the Hatfields. Now, they didn't start doing that. The first person that started doing that was Jesse's mother. Jesse James's mother. She was notorious for that. She bought up every gun she could get up, and people would come and visit, you know, because she had Jesse buried.
Well, the real villain in the piece that we would like to throttle was the reporters and the editors of the New York World. They're the ones who created the stereotype of the hillbilly.
Yeah, up until that point, you'll find
there wasn't anything.
No, it wasn't, and there was a reason behind that. And a lot of people don't realize just how important the media is, but there was a reason behind that. Now, when the colonists and when the early Americans were wanting to take over land that belonged to the Indians, all the newspapers and everything printed about these savages, how they, you know.
Now it goes back before that.
Well, yeah, I know, but
it's a noble savage in the French Road before the French Road. The age of enlightenment.
But what they done, they basically created a feeling in the populace that these people weren't worth, you know, that these people didn't deserve what they had. And they done the same thing in Appalachia. They wanted the land, they wanted the coal, they wanted the timber, they wanted the oil, they wanted the gas. And
get off your stump, we all know this.
Well, we know, but anyway, that's one of the reasons they've done that.
One thing important to remember about the Hatfields is they did have a lot of guns that they used. As far as, you know, they were involved in law enforcement. 2 of them was sheriffs of Logan County. 1 of them was deputy sheriff of Logan County. And they were also involved with Baldwin Phelps Agency. 2 of them were that eventually ended up getting shot here in Boomer. They were involved in a lot of law enforcement and those kind of activities. And they did use guns a lot. Cap Hatfield, he did shoot people. He killed several people. His brother Troy and Elias, the ones that was involved in the shootout down here in Boomer, they were involved in the liquor business, and they did have weapons that they used for protection. The other brothers, Willis, he was involved in a shootout down in Wyoming County, and ended up going to the penitentiary over it. But these guys were involved in a lot of shootings, and they did have a lot of weapons, and they did use weapons a lot.
There are lots of Hatfields and McCoys who have donated things to us, and they make the point of saying, we're not part of the feud. We're part of the feud. Including that Mod 94 Winchester rifle was owned by the same person who owned this, was a McCoy. And they were quick to say, we weren't Feud McCoys. McCoys from West Virginia.
A lot of the McCoys and the Hatfields were very good friends. They had intermarried and everything. Now, there was an incident, what was it, in 1960? Actually, there was a Hatfield cop there in Logan, and a boy from over in, a McCoy from over in Kentucky. This boy was a notorious drunk. But anyway, it got to where it hit the papers, and they were like, we'll call it the National Guard, because this boy had been chased off, so to speak. When he came back there, I guess in Logan County, Logan town, It started trouble again. Well, they got into it, and the Hatfield cop ended up shooting the bull. And the newspapers ran here, the Feud starts all over, you know, and they said, yeah, they were ready to call the National Guard. Governor said, this will stop right now, we're gonna start this again, you know. But I worked in Logan there for quite some time at the museum over there, and I got to meet a lot of the Hatfield and McCoy descendants and stuff.
When
But
the,
believe it or not, there were a lot of other feuds that went on at this time. The Johnson County War, there was like over 100 documented. It was called a war, it was no longer a feud. There was over 100 documented killings, you know. And this was the same time, you know, that the Wild Wild West was going on. You know, so there was a different mentality about firearms also. During the Civil War, a lot of Appalachia, a lot of West Virginia, you had to fend for yourself. You had guerrillas, and I don't mean monkeys, but you had, you know, the guerrilla groups like Quantrill Raiders, that these people came in and they weren't, these were just thieves on horseback. They weren't really for the cause, either side. They just seen this as an excuse to rape, pillage, and so a lot of people, they armed themselves because they didn't have no choice. They realized, hey, you know, I'm gonna have to fight it out, and a lot of them did. And so they grew up with a mentality about firearms different than ours. Okay, all right, enough.
thank you.
You can look at everything. But don't touch Joe's gun. That's the only thing that Jim really gets on to me about. Touching Joe's gun. I said, you can look at everything, just don't touch Joe's gun.